what was interesting about The Last Dance over the weekend, especially Sunday, episodes 5 and 6, is you got to learn a lot about Scottie Pippen. And Scottie Pippen was probably the most disrespected player on the Chicago Bulls. And what I mean by disrespected is that the organization really didn't respect him as a player.
Well, he was holding out that entire season for a while, and they mentioned it in, I think, 3 different episodes so far. I think 1, 4, and 5, all centered around that holdout. And Scottie Pippen, that whole saga, the media with Michael Jordan, his interviews, again, with the media, really have all centered around that. But then he eventually came back and played, so it was very interesting.
If Scottie Pippen never came back, they would have never won the title in 98. They were 0-4 in the beginning of the season. And they didn't start taking off until Scottie Pippen came back. So that team was all over the place. Now, I look at the Chicago Bulls a completely different way when you watch these different episodes. And I'm not going to take shots at Jerry Krause because he's dead and he's gone. And I'm not going to take shots at Phil Jackson either because we all know what Phil Jackson did to the New York Knicks. But I look at Scottie Pippen. Scottie Pippen was probably the 3rd or 4th best player in the NBA when he was on the Chicago Bulls in 1998. And when Michael Jordan retired for the year and a half that he was gone, Scottie Pippen was averaging about 26, 25 points a game, and he was easily the best player on the Chicago Bulls, and they were 1 game away from being in the NBA Finals. If there wasn't a couple of mistakes in game
they
number
lost
6.
to Orlando in that one, or the Knicks? Which one was that?
It wasn't the Knicks. They lost against Orlando when Michael Jordan came back.
Okay, because I know
wearing number 45.
Right, because they had the 2 years, and Orlando made it to the finals in 95. And
I think it was the Knicks.
Okay, so it was the Knicks year in 94 when they made it to the finals and played against the Rockets. So that's interesting. And again, you wonder what ifs. We can always play the what if games with that, but
there is no what if. If Michael Jordan actually played those 2 years, they would have won back-to-back titles because they were easily the best team in the NBA.
But again, how much of that would Pippen be that good offensively if Jordan was still there?
Pippen was still a good offensive player. Pippen was averaging 20 points a game. He was still a great offensive player. He was only averaging 5 or 6 more points a game because Michael Jordan wasn't a part of the team.
I'm just saying in terms of the shots, in terms of that, they do add up over the course of the season. Now, a playoff series, it's obviously a much smaller sample, so it would have been interesting to see. But yeah, you're probably right in terms of the instance of Michael Jordan still being there. Would they have done it both years is a question. I think they definitely do it one for sure. And again, the Eastern Conference landscape was still very strong at that time, and yet nobody could still beat the Bulls, even again with Pippen there, and even the Knicks and the Magic in those series that they really struggled with them too.
As far as the Olympic thing is concerned, and I know the Isaiah Thomas thing is going to be something that is going to be brought up. Charles Barkley spoke about it all week, and it's the first time I heard that Michael Jordan and him weren't speaking for the last couple of years because of what Charles Barkley has said about Michael Jordan as an owner. But all in all, Isaiah Thomas should have been a part of that team. Now, I don't know if it's true Michael Jordan had something to do with it, Magic Johnson had something to do with it, Scottie Pippen, or even Karl Malone, people are saying, wanted nothing to do with Isaiah Thomas. But Isaiah Thomas deserved to be on that team. He was the best point guard in the NBA at the time. You want to say John Stockton, you want to go back and forth. All-around game, Isaiah Thomas was a better player than John Stockton. He was a better offensive player. He could pass the ball, he could shoot the ball, and John Stockton wasn't a guy that you would put the ball in his hands to win a game. That was Karl Malone.
Right. Well, he wasn't a shooter, he was a passer. So.
Exactly. That's why I would take Isaiah Thomas any day over John Stockton.
Now, it's interesting because, again, people are saying, oh, it was all Jordan, it was all Pippen. But again, could it also be just the mantra of the team the way it was? Obviously, Isaiah Thomas.
That's what they're saying right now. That's what the Olympic president, the guy that runs the Olympics now, and the guy that ran the Olympics, I forget who was running the Olympics at that time. What they were saying, and there was a couple of executives on a bunch of radio stations and a bunch of radio shows this past week talking about why Isaiah Thomas didn't make the team. They didn't think he fit the team, and they didn't think that he fit out of all the 10 guys that they picked on the team, and they had to limit somebody out. To me, I would have limited out Christian Laettner.
Right, because that was the one I didn't even realize was on the team, and probably similar to what we saw with some other young, big prospects.
Yeah, but he was a big superstar in college.
I know that.
He won a national title with Duke, especially what he did getting to the national title game and the Final Four.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't know if I would have given Christian Laettner the opportunity to play for one of the greatest basketball teams ever assembled.
Right, that's my point. I think if you want to have that dream team mantra that the 1992 Dream Team had, you want to have all the best players in the league in what was a great era of basketball, rather than
era of basketball.
Right, rather than having, again, a young guy that obviously didn't play as well in the NBA, who was a big name at Duke, no doubt about that.
The biggest ever.
Right. So you have that mantra. You want to have everybody in there. All those guys that normally compete against each other now being on the same team and creating this mantra. If you wanted to do that, having Isaiah Thomas only really improves that mantra more. And again, I don't think they really needed the fear aspect in terms of winning the actual gold medal because they were just so stacked anyway. But in terms of that mantra, in terms of promoting it, in terms of marketing it the way it was. Because again, while international basketball was still pretty big, it's not as big as it was now. And Michael Jordan, as we mentioned many times, helped popularize it.
Well, Michael Jordan was a god. And
right.
Michael Jordan really transitioned the game, not only here, but in the world. Everybody in the world knew who he was. And you heard Charles Barkley. There are only two players he's ever been around in any sport that was as big as Michael Jordan was, and that was Michael Jordan and Tiger Woods. Those were the only two players, two athletes he's ever been around, as big. Everywhere they went, they were gods. And Michael Jordan, what makes Michael Jordan so interesting, and a lot of people talk about his political background, and he wasn't going to step in with the political situation with the North Carolina Senate or mayor or governor or whatever the heck it was, and he decided to step away. He was not going to be a part of the political side of it, and that's Michael Jordan. He was all about his game and being the best that he could be, and he didn't want to be part of any political background of anything.
Right,
so
especially with the positive effect he was having just in general. Obviously, there were
plus he has a brand, and his brand was the Jordan sneaker, and he didn't want to throw his brand to the dirt. Now, God forbid he decided to step in the political end of it. It could have affected his brand. Right. It could have.
Mm-hmm. We're seeing it now, too, with all the backlash that any kind of political comment received. Obviously, the media presence wasn't as big then, but in terms of just the icon that Jordan was, even, again, fan bases that hated him, they still, again, knew who he was. You probably still bought his shoes, everything like that.
I didn't, until now.
No, maybe not you. I'm just saying some maybe did. The point is the mantra that he brought in terms of his game. If he says something political, which, again, that could tick anyone off, no matter what party you're on, that, again, could have affected him in terms of the way that he's thought of, even, again, the way he was thought of across the league, too, if there were differences in politics. Now, players stand up for themselves most of the time, but in terms of the political mantra, there's not going to be anyone that's going to be perfectly in line with each other.
It's the smartest thing Michael Jordan could have done, and Absolutely. I don't care what anybody says. He stayed away from the one thing he knew nothing about. And I know a lot of people didn't like that. President Obama, who was actually, the ex-President Obama, who was actually on
he was on both episodes,
the documentary, and he talked about Michael Jordan and that he thought Michael Jordan should have done more. I think Michael Jordan was right. He has nothing to do with the politics. He stayed away from it. Michael Jordan also had a brand with Nike, and he didn't want to be with Nike. In the beginning, he wanted to be with Adidas, but Adidas at the time was not doing well in sales, and they didn't want to bring in anybody else to wear their product because they had so many NBA superstars under their product. So Michael Jordan had an offer from Nike to come in and talk to some of their executives, and he didn't want to do that. And his mother and his father pushed him, and he got one of the biggest sneaker deals in NBA history at the time. I think it was $250,000 guaranteed. Now, Michael Jordan's shoes are worldwide. It's the biggest selling sneaker in the world, and he makes about $45-50 million from Nike every single year. And this is a guy that hasn't played in the NBA for almost 15 years.
And he's still just known that well worldwide, and I'm sure Adidas is now going to regret that for the rest of their lives as not being maybe as prominent of a sneaker in the NBA. They're more of now, you look at them for like soccer and stuff like that, music. Yeah.
Musicians that like to wear it. And again, Michael Jordan liked Adidas, but Adidas didn't give him the offer, and he really didn't want to go with Nike. And it showed you really how faithful he is to the Nike brand, because at the Olympics, the Reebok organization, Reebok built their jackets and their pants, and that they wanted all the NBA players, all the Dream Team, to wear those when they were receiving their gold medals. Mm-hmm. And Michael Jordan wore it, but he wore a flag over the Reebok sign because he felt it was going to disrespect the brand of Nike and his brand under Nike. And that just shows you how Michael Jordan looked at not just his brand, but as a brand as a whole. And Nike was the one that gave him his opportunity, and he made sure that he was protecting the brand of Nike.
Didn't he wear that again in the 96 Olympics too, when he was in the opening ceremony? He wore that same thing over his over that warm-up jacket?
I don't know. I don't know.
Because I know he was still trying to stand by being that representative for Nike and, of course, what it became in Air Jordan. So obviously he was still trying to stand by that too. So he did a good job in terms of, I guess, indirect branding with that Jordan company, and hence it's huge worldwide.
It's incredible. It really is when you look at the story. But the fact that Scottie Pippen was never respected the way he should have been respected by the Chicago Bulls organization is absolutely remarkable, because I didn't know that. I've watched the Bulls, and I've been a Knicks fan my whole life. I grew up a Knicks fan. And by the way, they disrespected Patrick Ewing so much on that documentary. And I understand Michael Jordan doesn't like Patrick Ewing and didn't like the New York Knicks, and the New York Knicks have really been an organization that he couldn't stand playing against, because they used to toss him into the audience every time he went up for a layup, if you remember the New York Knicks teams. Mm-hmm. And Xavier McDaniel being one of them. And Xavier McDaniel was on one of the radio stations out here talking about those Knicks, and that he was traded for Charles Smith, if you remember. And Charles Smith was the reason why the Knicks didn't win the championship in 1994.
Yeah, they were presenting it, I think, in episode 5, I think it was, as the Knicks were portrayed as that new Pistons kind of thing. Obviously, not to the same popularity level that the bad boy Pistons branded themselves as, but the same effect, as you mentioned many times.
It's crazy when you think about the New York Knicks and really what the Chicago Bulls did to the New York Knicks all those years, when the Knicks teams were the best Knicks teams we've seen since the 70s. And I never got a chance to see the 70 Knicks. So they had chances for like 7 years to get to the Eastern Conference Finals and jump over the hump against the Indianapolis Pacers, the Indiana Pacers, or the Chicago Bulls or the Orlando Magic, and they could never get over the hump. And when they finally did get over the hump and win the Eastern Conference Finals, they had to play the Rockets.
And I didn't realize they were actually up 2-0 in one of those series too. I thought it was just the Bulls were just that big of a kryptonite to everybody, but the Knicks were up 2-0, and then they just lost badly.
Well,
after
that was because Michael Jordan couldn't take it anymore, and everybody remembers Michael Jordan went to Atlantic City, which was another thing that they brought up in the documentary with his father. Mm-hmm. And a lot of people believe one of the main reasons why his father is not here anymore was because of gambling. And Michael Jordan is a gambler, and you saw that when they were on the airplane, Michael Jordan was playing with the guys that wanted to spend money. He was playing poker, and he would throw so much money into the pot so people wouldn't bet on the pot. That's the way he played. And then he'd go all the way up to the front of the plane to play like dollar hands with blackjack with some of the guys that didn't have the money that Michael Jordan had in his pocket. So, and Michael Jordan was always a competitor. He didn't like to lose. He didn't believe in losing. And that was the greatness of Michael Jordan. Wasn't the fact that Michael Jordan was Michael Jordan. It was the fact that he didn't believe in losing, and he didn't believe in giving up. And that was the greatness of who he was as a player.
Considering the fact that how much he's involved with his brand, his personal brand, and obviously Air Jordan, I'm surprised he would have been that involved in terms of the gambling aspect of it. I understand doing it on occasion. I mean, the poker, blackjack, you want to have fun with your teammates, your friends, whatever. But he seemed like it was a passion for him, and that was something that was very surprising to me.
It's not surprising to me. When you're a competitor and you like to win, and you're a winner, and you've always known winning, look everywhere he's gone. Even in high school, when they didn't pick him to make the team the first year he was out there, he made sure he got back on the court and proved to everybody why he was the best player on the court. And then he went to North Carolina, and he was, at the time when he was in North Carolina, he wasn't even the best player going into his freshman year, and he completely took over. And then when Michael Jordan came into the league, he was a dominant player. Everywhere he went, he won. Everywhere. Everything he's done, except being an owner. And that's why Barkley has taken shots at him. Barkley took shots.
I think he just needs a reason to take shots.
No, Barkley and him are best friends. That's the fact.
Yeah, but...
And Barkley would never... And you're wrong, Speedy, because you can laugh all you want, and I am going to step in on this. Charles Barkley has never spoke bad about Michael Jordan at all. Never taking shots.
No, I'm not saying directly at Michael Jordan. I just think Charles Barkley likes to just make a bunch of random hot takes just to make a random hot takes. But that has nothing to do with Michael Jordan. You like, yes, about the Knicks and about other organizations, but not about Michael Jordan, who is like a brother to him.
And the fact that he came out and he took shots at Michael Jordan as an executive only shows you that Charles Barkley is only speaking the truth. Michael Jordan has not been a good executive.